Most people wrote this off as a classic story of sleep paralysis, and in the sake of transparency, I did too for many years. However, as time has passed from this incident, certain details have come to light that have made me wonder about that explanation, if not wholly reject it. To be completely honest, I don't know what happened, because it happened to my mother and not me, but I did wake up to it. To see my mom weeping in the arms of my sister in our darkened room in the middle of the night. I'll tell it as I've heard it from my mom and sister, and recall it from my own memory. When I was 5, my 18-year-old sister rescued my mother and I from a house with bullet holes in the windows and shut-off heat in the dead of a northern Ohio winter. My sister escaped my father's abuse to work a factory job with her boyfriend, which is now her husband, and scratch up enough money together for a small 2-bedroom apartment. She had her taste of freedom, but couldn't enjoy it as long as me and my mother froze in our broken home. She rolled up one day with a sympathetic uncle, a truck, and said, "Let's go." I owe my life to her. My mom and I moved into her second bedroom in the apartment, and years later, over tear-stained glasses of wine, I later found out what happened to my mom wasn't the only thing that happened in that room, but here it is. My mom was sleeping on her little pad of blankets on the floor when suddenly her eyes opened from dead sleep. Her gaze fixed to a spot on the ceiling, but couldn't move from there. She was utterly paralyzed, incapable of even moving her eyes. I was sleeping right beside her. She said she felt something laying on top of her, crushing her with its weight. She couldn't turn her eyes to see it, but felt and heard its breath rattling against her neck, feeling its head and teeth pushed up against the underside of her jaw, rasping its breath. The horror she described the few times she recounted this for me still moves her to tears. The utter helplessness and fear to the fiber of her being that possesses her, as this thing pushed her against the floor with its weight and its sickening rasp on her neck. All the while, she couldn't move a millimeter, couldn't even tear her eyes away from the ceiling as the thing breathed on her. She says her life flashed before her eyes, and she felt the tears flooding, but she couldn't even cry. My mom has had a hard life, and it's made her deeply religious. The only thing she could think to do was to pray to Jesus and beg him to take this thing off of her so she could go on to live and protect me. She tried to move her lips to pray, but couldn't. So, in her mind, she screamed Jesus' name to come save her. She said she screamed his name for what felt like hours. My sister was sleeping in the master bedroom just down the hall. And here's where it gets even weirder. My sister said she woke up in the dead of a sound sleep to a nagging, ringing feeling of anxiety in her gut. "Go check on Mom," it told her. But she thought she was being crazy. On and on this back and forth went, like a mental argument between part of her saying to go back to sleep. My sister's cautious side gave in, and as she tells it, she got up and crept into the blackened hallway to go check on Mom. As she rounded the slight corner to our bedroom, the hair stood up on her neck, telling her flatly that something was wrong. She peered into the slightly ajar door of our bedroom, her sudden feeling of terror surmounting. "Mom," she whispered. She said that when she finally clicked on the light, my mother's eyes were rolled so far back up at the ceiling they were white, and her skin and limbs were gray and stiff. My sister rushed to my mom and began to shake her, thinking the worst. I awoke in my little kid bed to my mom sucking in a massive breath and beginning to weep, the life flooding back into her veins. She said the moment my sister touched her, she was free. I can still see them crying. I don't know for certain what happened in the room that night. My mom, being extremely superstitious, won't even say the word demon, but I know that's the word she's reserved for the thing that held her against the floor that night. When I learned what sleep paralysis was, that's what I chalked this whole thing up to. Simple, a nice, easy explanation for a weird night I remember as a kid. That wasn't until my mom told me of a few things that I must have forgotten, being so young. Out of nowhere, I started sleepwalking when we moved to this place. She would find me leaned against the 4th-story window in the middle of the night, with my small hands trying to undo the window latch. My mother still lives there, and I'm convinced it's the reason she's went mad. Over the years, she's become a selective hoarder, methodically sealing the room off with layer of trash upon layer of trash, and now, even getting into the room is impossible.